So let's talk about Southernprepper1 and Huples Cat and which one of them is right, which one of them are wrong, or are they both right or are they both wrong? So recently they've been talking about the food shortages in China, COVID-19, and possible war with the United States between the US and China. And Southernprepper1 is saying that stockpiling food is probably a high probability indicator of a possible war or war footing. Huples Cat is saying that, or indicating that COVID-19, weather disasters, climate change, all together are working to produce a food shortage in China. And that this is the reason, not war footing, in that the U.S. wouldn't go to war over Taiwan. Now, I myself fall outside the sphere of both of them. What I see is there is a weather-related famine crisis in China. Now, we don't know what caused this. What we do know is back in the late 1970s, all the major powers of the world signed a treaty not to deploy weather weapons and use them. Now, it is known that weather weapons did exist back in the 70s. And with technological process, they would be even more powerful today. Just as we know with nuclear weapons, there are more powerful weapons than nuclear weapons today. Some of them use a nuclear device as a source of plasma to power them. So there are other possibilities besides nuclear war or weather war. One thing neither person has talked about is also in the 70s, race-specific biological weapons were invented and experimented with. Now, what I can tell you about this is that experimentation continued. It didn't stop in the 70s. And another scenario with confrontation between China and the US or China and India could involve race-specific bioweapons in addition to nuclear weapons. So there's a separation of causes here. In one instance, Taiwan can be a catalyst for conflict between the US and China. But there's another overwhelming confrontation between the US and China, which doesn't involve Taiwan as a cause. And that is domination of world economies in the Pacific Ocean basin. This exists whether Taiwan is a problem or not. And I'll give you an example. Back when I was working at remediating a nuclear dump for the government, we were digging up and removing this material along with the chemical and biohazards that were there also. This included biological weaponry, components, and all kinds of chemicals, in addition to the radiological. And one of our contractors that was subbed under the engineering company I worked for, they were a primary contractor for the US Navy. And I had 4 of their divers on site. And I also had personnel loaned to us from Oak Ridge Nuclear Facility. And one day, a CH-53 flew through the no-fly zone and landed in the middle of the nuclear dump with rotor downwash spreading crap all over the place, and picked up my 4 divers to take them to Norfolk, Virginia. Now, what we knew at the time was the Chinese had a freighter in Norfolk, and it was carrying cement. So the cement powder, the chemical assay did not come back showing that it was pure cement powder. And the Chinese were smuggling something in mixed in with the cement powder. And the divers went up, and the hold on that ship was 90 feet deep So they had to throw plywood down and take drop tubes and take samples of this material, provided the samples to the military, and then, of course, you're never shown the results of what was actually in that ship. But what we do know is all governments of the world use this as a way to smuggle material, chemicals, weapons, substances into countries. They will mix things into foodstuffs, chemicals, dry goods, whatever the ship is carrying. So we know that China has been operating against the interests in prepping the battlefield against the United States for well over 30 years. So we cannot separate that from what's going on today. We know this is an ongoing thing. Now, the second thing here is, when you're looking at climate change, the climate change models are predictive against multiple outcomes, and they show a trend depending on the inputs. But they are not accurate, and they have never been accurate, because over the 30 years they've been in use, they have never predicted outcomes. And the reason for that is they don't include changes in output of the sun, changes in particle loads that are in space incoming into the atmosphere. They don't use changes in cloud structures and density and how it alters temperature. And they have a problem with how the interface between the ocean and land works. Those are the main problems with the climate change models. And we know that the carbon we're burning came from the atmosphere long ago. Now, as a climate scientist myself, there's two pieces of key information I've been waiting to see change in for 30 years. And that is a change in the FDA hardy zones, and also the frost lines. These are key indicators that will give us an idea of what's actually happening with the climate long term. Because if your hardiness zones are changing, that means that either the plant matter that's grown for food in the area will not be viable, either because it's getting colder or it's getting hotter. So we have not really seen a change in hardiness zones. The other thing we don't have good information on, or it's being suppressed, is the frost lines. We're not really seeing data on how the frost lines are changing in distribution across continents. These are two key pieces of information that would prove or disprove all these theories we hear. So this is a few thoughts on the current situation. So we can see that there's actually multiple conflicts. There is a conflict over Taiwan. There is a general conflict between the United States and China over commerce and control of the Pacific Basin. There's also a conflict between India and China. Any of those could involve race-specific bioweapons. They could involve nuclear war and conventional war. In my opinion, they will include all three, because there is no real change between conventional and nuclear war in a lot of the philosophy of different countries. What's been hidden from the public is there are nuclear weapons that are in the sub-kiloton range, and they breach the gap between conventional and what we think are nuclear weapons. So there is no real big separation of those weapon systems. So just a few of the thoughts. Please comment, rate, subscribe. Give me your opinion. Tell me whether you agree or disagree. Thanks for watching.